All right, let's jump right into this explainer. We're going to take a journey today, going all the way from huge global classification theories straight down into the exact, precise laboratory measurements of the human skull. And hey, if you're gearing up for an exam on this subject, you are in exactly the right place. We're going to tie all these concepts together so you get a really solid, structured understanding of human variation. So look around you for a second and just think about a pretty fundamental question. What actually creates the boundaries between different groups of people? Is it our underlying biology? Is it this massive, rich tapestry of culture? Or is it something else entirely? Maybe something we humans just constructed over time? Well, to really grasp human variation, we've got to nail down two totally distinct concepts that people constantly mix up: ethnicity and race. Let's kick things off with ethnicity. Think of ethnicity as a culturally determined identity. It's really about socially constructed groups where the people inside them share deep cultural attachments. We're talking about things like a shared linguistic heritage, religious affiliations, claimed ancestry, or even just shared customs and daily rituals. It's basically an expression of those primordial attachments in a real, undeniable sense of community. Now, contrast that with race. Race is a historically and anthropologically constructed concept that was used to classify populations based purely on inheritable biological and morphological traits. Back in the day, early scientists hyper-focused on physical attributes, things like skin color, head shape, hair type, which, as we know now, are essentially just physical responses to genetics and environmental adaptation. So, here's the absolutely crucial takeaway to remember for your exam. Ethnicity, it's culturally determined and it's fluid. You can literally have multiple ethnic connections or affiliations. Race, on the flip side, was historically defined as biologically determined and strictly unitary, meaning, historically speaking, individuals were rigidly boxed into just one race. Grasping that difference right off the bat is absolutely essential for any anthropological study. All right, here is our roadmap for this explainer. We'll be hitting human variation in race, classifying Indian populations, linguistic and skeletal records, the science of craniometry, and wrapping up with UNESCO and human equality. Section 1. Human variation and race. Let's look at how early scholars tried to categorize all this physical diversity. Historically, early scientists tried to organize the whole globe into major divisions. In older literature, you're going to see three primary classifications pop up a lot. First, Caucasoid, which they characterize by leptorrhine or narrow noses and varied skin tones. Then Negroid, noted for platyrrhine or broader noses and facial prognathism. And finally, Mongoloid, identified by the epicanthic eye fold and brachycephalic, meaning broad head shapes. Now, while these broad buckets laid the historical groundwork, they very quickly proved totally inadequate for capturing the true, complex reality of humanity, especially in highly diverse regions. Moving to Section 2, classifying Indian populations. Let's zoom in on the incredible demographic diversity of the subcontinent. Now, this is an absolutely brilliant framework for your exam prep. Notice the massive methodological evolution in how Indian populations were classified over time. It starts back in 1901 with H. Risley using basic anthropometry to single out 7 types. Then, B.S. Guha expanded that massively, looking at 38 different characters to identify 6 distinct racial strains. Later on, S.S. Sarkar kind of pivoted, narrowing the focus way down to just the cephalic index, to define 3 types. And finally, V. Balakrishnan revolutionized the whole thing by using modern genetics and blood systems to map out 4 types. It's fascinating, right? You literally see the scientific lens zooming all the way from external bone measurements right down to internal genetics. But, and this is a big but, it's vital you know that these early typologies faced some intense scientific pushback. Methodologically speaking, early researchers like Risley and Guha relied on dangerously small sample sizes. They also totally ignored environmental factors, like they failed to realize that a certain bone shape might literally just be an adaptation to the local diet or climate. Crucially, they often completely blurred the lines between social constructs, like castes, and actual biological entities. And, as we saw with Sarkar, putting all your eggs in one basket by over-relying on a single metric, like head shape, just can't capture the complex reality of population dynamics. All right, Section 3, Linguistic and Skeletal Records. Let's trace human movement through some much deeper evidence. You know, language is actually a fantastic tracker for human movement. In India, populations speak languages that belong to 4 major families. First, the Austric or Munda speakers, located primarily in the central and eastern plateaus, and these folks are widely considered the earliest settlers. Then you've got the Sino-Tibetan family up in the northeast and the Himalayas. And finally, the vast bulk of the subcontinent is geographically split between the Indo-Aryan languages in the north and central regions and the Dravidian languages down in the Deccan and south. And the chronological fossil record? It tells a perfectly matching story. It stretches all the way from the really robust Paleolithic Narmada man found in Madhya Pradesh, dating back roughly 2.5 million years, right up to the Mesolithic hunter-gatherers who started showing early adaptive changes around 12,000 years ago. Then, fast forward to 8,000 years ago, we see Neolithic farmers. Their settled agricultural lifestyles actually altered their skeletal robusticity, which eventually led to the incredibly diverse cranial types we find in Iron Age megalithic burials. We are literally watching evolution and adaptation happen right there in the bone. And here is where it all brilliantly ties together into our modern genomic consensus. Thanks to advanced DNA studies, we now know that anatomically modern humans entered India from Africa around 70,000 years ago. What does that mean for you? It means that beneath all those varied languages and underneath all that morphological diversity in skull shapes and skin colors, there is a single, shared, foundational genetic base for all these populations. Moving on to Section 4, the science of craniometry. Let's look at the actual toolkit used to measure the skeletal diversity. So craniometry relies on a sort of universal map of the skull. The cranium itself is made up of distinct bones. You've got the frontal, parietal, occipital, temporal, maxilla, and the mandible. Now, to measure these consistently across the board, anthropologists use highly standardized landmarks. Take the glabella, for instance. That's the most projecting point right between your eyebrows. Or the bregma, which is exactly where the sutures meet on the very top of your head. And then there's the basion, located at the base of the skull right on the edge of the foramen magnum. These landmarks are absolutely crucial. They act as the exact, unchanging starting points for literally every scientific measurement you'll need to know. Let's take those landmarks and see how they actually work in a practical laboratory setting. Say you need to measure maximum cranial length. You've got to follow some very precise steps. Step 1, align the skull in the Frankfurt horizontal plane. That's a standard positioning trick to ensure uniformity. Next, you grab an instrument called a spreading caliper. You place one pointed end securely on that glabella landmark at the front. Then you take the other point and sweep it along the back of the skull, right over the occipital bone until you hit the ovis the cranion, the furthest projecting point. Finally, you record the measurement. It's not guesswork, it's a highly precise physical science. And our final segment, Section 5, UNESCO and Human Equality. Let's talk about the social implications of all this science. Historically speaking, minor biological variations were wildly and tragically misinterpreted, which directly fueled racism. In anthropological terms, we need to define racism objectively. It is the scientifically invalid assertion that biological differences somehow dictate the absolute superiority or inferiority of a group. It's the completely false belief that physical variations, which, remember, are literally just genetic responses to different environments, somehow determine a whole population's intrinsic value or intelligence. To completely dismantle this misinformation, the global scientific community came together and issued the landmark UNESCO Statement on Race, and it definitively declares this: all humans living today belong to a single species, Homo sapiens, and are derived from a common stock. There is no existence of so-called pure races. The scientific consensus here is absolute, guys. Human variation is an evolutionary masterpiece of environmental adaptation. It is not a hierarchy of value. In fact, science proves that intra-racial variation, the differences between individuals of the exact same group, is actually way higher than interracial variation. Which leaves us with one final thought to chew on. We've traced the whole timeline today, right? From our shared origins in Africa all the way to the massive linguistic and physical diversity we see today. We've seen exactly how science measures this variation and how those early flawed classifications were ultimately replaced by genetic truth. So, if science definitively proves that our biological differences are just ancient environmental adaptations, how will you let the knowledge of our shared origins reshape your worldview and ultimately our cultural future? Keep that question in your mind as you review this material for your exams. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.